The alarm was screaming before I even opened my eyes. Red light filled the cabin, and the floor shook so hard that my teeth rattled. Grace was already at the controls, her hands moving fast, her face pale in the flashing light. "They found us," she said. "They found the ship." I did not need her to explain more than that. For 3 years we had been running from the authority, and every single time they found us, the chase ended the same way. Someone did not make it to the next jump. This time, I promised myself, it would be different. "How long do we have?" I asked. "Maybe 4 minutes before their scanners lock on us completely," she said. "After that, there is no outrunning them." My name is Elena. I was born on a mining colony that no longer exists, at least not under any name I would recognize now. The authority took it apart piece by piece, the way they took apart every colony that refused to hand over its people as workers. I lost my parents to that system when I was 9 years old. I lost my brother to it when I was 17, and now, at 26, I was the last one holding together a crew of 11 people who had nothing left to lose either. Peter came running into the cockpit, holding onto the wall as the ship rocked again. He was our engineer, a quiet man who rarely spoke unless something needed fixing, but right now his eyes were wide with worry. "The rear engine is losing power," he said. "If we push it any harder, it will fail completely. If we don't push it, they will catch us," Grace snapped back. I looked at the navigation screen. There was only one direction left open to us. A stretch of space that every map marked with a warning symbol, and nothing else. No name, no coordinates explained, just a warning that had existed for as long as anyone could remember. A warning that people whispered about but never explained clearly, because nobody who went in ever came back out to explain it. The Forbidden Zone. "Take us there," I said. Grace turned to look at me, her hand hovering over the controls. "Elena, you know what they say about that place." "I know what they say," I answered. "But I also know what happens if we stay here. At least in there, we have a chance." She did not argue anymore. She pulled the ship hard to the left, and the stars outside the window blurred into long white lines as we jumped forward at a speed that pressed all of us back into our seats. Behind us, the enemy ships tried to follow, but as we crossed into the marked zone, one by one, their signals disappeared from our screen. For a moment, there was only silence, the kind of silence that feels heavier than any alarm. "They stopped," Peter said, staring at the empty screen. "Why would they stop chasing us?" "Maybe they are afraid of this place too," Grace said quietly. I did not answer. I was staring out the front window at what lay ahead of us, and for the first time since the alarms had started ringing, my fear turned into something else, something closer to wonder. Ahead of us was a planet. Not a dead rock, not a poisoned world covered in ash the way the old stories described this place. It was blue and green, wrapped in soft white clouds, glowing gently under the light of a calm yellow sun. "That cannot be right," Peter whispered. "Every record says this system was destroyed centuries ago." "Maybe the records are wrong," I said. We had no fuel left to go anywhere else, and our engine was failing more with every passing minute. Whatever waited for us down there, we no longer had a choice. I gave the order, and Grace steered us down through the clouds. The landing was rough. Our ship skidded across an open field before finally coming to a stop near a line of tall green trees. For a long moment, none of us moved. We simply sat there, breathing, staring out at grass and sky and trees, things none of us had truly seen with our own eyes in years. Then came the sound of an engine, low and steady, growing closer. "Someone is coming," Peter said. My hand moved instinctively toward the small device we kept for emergencies, though it offered little real protection. Grace stood beside me, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed on the tree line where a vehicle was now visible, kicking up dust as it approached. The vehicle stopped a short distance away, and 3 figures stepped out. They looked like us. 2 arms, 2 legs, walking upright, dressed in simple clothing that looked worn from work rather than made for show. For a moment, my mind refused to accept what I was seeing, because everything I had ever been taught said that nothing lived in this place except monsters and ghosts. One of them, a tall man with short brown hair, raised both his hands slowly, palms open, and called out to us. "You are safe," he said. "Nobody here is going to harm you." None of us moved. After years of running, after years of learning that every stranger might be a threat, it was not easy to simply believe words like that. "Who are you?" I asked, stepping forward despite the warning look Grace gave me. "My name is Daniel," he said. "This is Claire, and this is Oliver. We live here." "Here," I repeated. "In the Forbidden Zone." Daniel's expression shifted, something between confusion and understanding. "Is that what they call this place? Out there?" That is exactly what they call it, Grace answered. A place where nothing survives. A place marked as death on every map we have ever seen. Claire, a woman with steady eyes and a calm voice, stepped closer. We have heard that before. From others who arrived the same way you did. Frightened, out of fuel. Expecting to find horror waiting for them. And what did they find instead? I asked. They found people, Claire said simply. The same as you are finding now. It took a long moment for those words to settle into my mind. Around me, my crew stood frozen, uncertain whether to trust what we were hearing, or to expect some trick hidden beneath the calm tone of these strangers. Why would anyone spread a lie like that? Peter finally asked, and keep it alive for so long? Oliver, the youngest of the three, spoke for the first time, because fear keeps people away better than any wall ever could. Whoever wanted this system left alone a long time ago found the easiest way to guarantee it. They let fear do the work instead of soldiers. We were led, not forced, toward a settlement built into the hills a short distance from where we landed. As we walked, I noticed how different everything looked from the world I had grown up in. There were no fences topped with warning lights. No guards standing at every corner watching for anyone who might step out of line. Children ran between buildings without fear, laughing loudly enough that the sound echoed across the open square at the center of the settlement. I found myself staring at those children longer than I meant to. It had been years since I had heard a child laugh without listening at the same time, for the sound of something worse following close behind. You seem surprised, Claire said, walking beside me. I am, I admitted. Where I come from, that kind of freedom does not exist. It exists here, she said. It took a long time to build, and it is not something we take for granted. But it exists. That night they gave us food. Real food, not the dried rations we had been surviving on for months. They gave us a place to rest that did not require anyone to keep watch through the night. For the first time since I could remember, I slept without waking suddenly at every small sound. In the morning, Daniel found me sitting outside, watching the sun rise over the hills. He sat down beside me without asking, the way someone might sit beside an old friend rather than a stranger who had crashed onto his land the day before. You have questions, he said. More than I know how to ask, I admitted. Why does everyone outside believe this place is empty? Why does every map mark it as forbidden? Why has no one ever come to check if that is even true? Daniel was quiet for a moment before answering. A long time ago, before any of us who live here now were even born, a powerful fleet came to this system. They wanted to take it, the same way they had taken other worlds before it. The people who lived here at that time fought to protect their home, and in the end, they were defeated. Nearly everyone was lost. Then who are you? I asked. If everyone here was defeated so long ago. We are not descendants of that first world, he said. Our ancestors arrived here later, escaping trouble of our own, much the same as you did. We found the ruins left behind. We found the old warning signals still broadcasting their message across the stars, telling everyone to stay away. And instead of removing them, we let those warnings continue. Why? I asked. Because it works, Daniel said simply. Nobody comes looking for trouble in a place everyone already believes is cursed. It gave us the one thing every one of us needed most after fleeing here. Time. Time to grow, to build, live without looking over our shoulder every single hour of every single day. I thought about my own life, about years spent glancing constantly toward every shadow, every sound, every unfamiliar face. I understood, more than I wanted to admit, exactly why they would choose silence and fear over attention and danger. What happens now? I asked. Now that we know the truth. That depends on you, Daniel said. You can stay here, if you wish. Build a life the same way we have. Or, if you would rather leave, we will not stop you. But we would ask that you keep our secret, the same way every person who has come here before you has chosen to do. And if I say no? I asked, testing him, though part of me already knew what his answer would be. Daniel simply smiled, calm and unbothered. Then you say no, and we still help you leave safely, with enough fuel to get wherever you decide to go. We are not in the business of forcing people into anything. That is exactly the world we left behind. Over the following days, my crew slowly began to settle into the rhythm of life in the settlement. Peter spent most of his time with a group of local engineers, working to repair our ship using parts they had gathered from ships that had crashed here decades before us. Grace, who trusted almost no one easily, found herself drawn to a woman named Ruth, who taught her how to grow vegetables in soil that did not need to be tested first for poison. I spent my time with Daniel and Claire, learning as much as I could about how this hidden world had managed to survive for so long without ever being discovered. They showed me records stretching back hundreds of years, Careful notes about every ship that had ever crossed into the Forbidden Zone. Some had come seeking shelter, just like we had. A few had come seeking answers, curious enough to risk everything simply to know the truth. Every single one of them, according to the records, had eventually chosen to stay. Has anyone ever left and told the outside world what they found here? I asked Claire one afternoon, as we walked along a path lined with trees, heavier with fruit than any I had seen in years. A few have left, she said. None have ever told. Why not? Because telling would destroy the one thing that keeps this place safe, she said. And most people, once they understand what they would be putting at risk, choose silence without needing to be asked twice. I understood that choice more clearly with every day that passed. Word had reached us, carried quietly through channels Daniel refused to explain in detail, that the authority had noticed our ship's signal vanish at the edge of the Forbidden Zone. For a moment I feared they might send another fleet, curious enough finally to test the old warning themselves. They will not come, Daniel assured me, though there was a weight behind his calm words that told me this was not the first time such a fear had been raised. How can you be certain? Because their own stories have convinced them just as thoroughly as they were meant to, he said. Fear built carefully enough does not need soldiers standing guard. It stands guard on its own, forever, as long as nobody questions it too closely. Still, as the days turned into weeks, I could not fully let go of the tension that had lived inside me for so long that it had become part of who I was. I found myself waking early each morning, walking the edge of the settlement, watching the sky the same way I had once watched it for danger. It took time to understand that here, the sky held nothing waiting to hurt me. One morning, Oliver joined me on my walk, his young face thoughtful in the early light. You still watch the sky like you expect something bad to happen, he said. Old habits, I admitted. It gets easier, he said. I remember watching the same way, when my family first arrived here. It took almost a year before I stopped flinching every time a ship passed overhead. Your family came here too? I asked. Everyone here came from somewhere else, he said. Running from something. That is the truth nobody outside this place understands. This is not some hidden fortress guarded by warriors. It is simply a quiet corner of the galaxy, where enough tired, frightened people finally found a place to rest. Those words stayed with me long after that conversation ended. I thought about everything I had believed about the Forbidden Zone before we crossed into it. I thought about the fear that had been passed down to me, the same way it had clearly been passed down to countless others before me, without a single person ever bothering to question whether that fear was actually true. By the time our ship was fully repaired, several weeks later, my crew gathered to make a decision none of us had expected to face. Whether to leave, finally free to travel wherever we wished with a working ship and full tanks of fuel, or to stay in the one place that had offered us something the rest of the galaxy never had. Grace was the first to speak. I want to stay, she said. I am tired of running, Elena. I do not know how much longer I could have kept doing it, even if we had made it out of this system safely. Peter agreed without much hesitation. The people here have been kind to us without asking anything in return except honesty. I would rather build something here than keep searching for a home that may not exist anywhere else. I looked at the rest of my crew, each of them nodding quietly in agreement. In the end, the choice was almost unanimous. Almost everyone wanted to stay. I stood at the edge of the settlement that evening, watching the sun set behind the hills, thinking about everything that had brought us here, the years of running, the fear that had shaped every decision I had ever made, the single moment of desperation that had sent us flying into a place everyone believed would destroy us, only to find it was the safest place any of us had ever known. Daniel found me there again, the same way he had that first morning. Have you decided? He asked. I think I already knew the answer before I even asked the question. I said, I am staying. We all are. He nodded, unsurprised. Most do, eventually. I still do not understand one thing, I said. If everyone who comes here eventually chooses to stay, and nobody ever leaves to tell the truth, how do you explain the fact that new people keep arriving at all? Someone, somewhere, must still believe there is a reason to run in this direction. Daniel smiled softly. Fear does not need to be told the truth to keep spreading, he said. It only needs a single dramatic warning, repeated often enough, by people frightened enough to believe it without question. The authority marked this place as forbidden centuries ago, and every generation since has simply repeated the warning without ever bothering to check if it was still true. That fear becomes its own kind of protection, long after the reason behind it has faded away. I thought about all the stories I had grown up hearing, the warnings whispered among frightened workers who had never once questioned where those warnings had come from. I thought about how easily fear could be passed from one generation to the next, shaping decisions and destinies without a single person ever pausing to ask if any of it was actually based on truth. We were so certain we would find monsters here, I said quietly. And instead you found people, Daniel said. The very thing everyone always fears the most, and yet, in the end, the very thing every person running from something is secretly hoping to find. Somewhere safe, somewhere human. I looked out over the settlement, at the lights slowly appearing in windows as evening settled over the hills, at the sound of children still laughing somewhere in the distance despite the darkness gathering above them. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I did not feel the need to watch the sky for danger. I finally understood the truth behind the Forbidden Zone, a truth far simpler and far more human than any story I had grown up fearing. It was never a graveyard, and it was never a curse. It was simply a hidden place built quietly by people who had once been exactly like us. Tired of running, desperate for rest, and brave enough to build something worth protecting once they finally found it. We had escaped into the Forbidden Zone expecting the end of everything. Instead, we found the beginning of something we never knew we were still allowed to hope for. Home.